Hi there, I'm Dani, spiritualtherapist.com, and I'm so excited today to sit and share time with the incredible, the global humanitarian, Sacha Stone. Welcome, Sacha.
Very good to see you. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. I'm so glad that you're here. Now, I know that you've been traveling these past 9 months, and I think my first question that I would love to ask you, which I believe to be of the utter importance, is how are your baby dogs? How are your doggies?
Well, pretty good. Actually, there's one of them on the sofa there, you can see. One,
Oh.
one of them is asleep there, and the other one is God knows where. But they're good. Thank you very much. They're kind of you.
Oh, well, what was it like? Like, did you FaceTime with them, or what was it like when you walked in the front door?
No, I'm not a gooey. I'm not a gooey animal. I'm a white African. I'm fairly austere with animals. I mean, I love them and they love me, but I don't get too gooey.
You don't get too gooey. Well, I'm glad you're back together with them. And I know it's been a really bumpy old year or two, really, or for a couple of hundred, really, if we're honest, for many, many people. But I'm really happy and proud of what you're doing. So I'd like to really go into like the childhood, the boyhood, like who is the little boy that became the great man that's kicking ass and taking names around the planet? I want to start with, Sacha, what was your first memory as a child?
Oh, Lord. I remember very clearly being about 5, maybe 6 months of age, and holding myself up on a windowsill in the living room in Africa, looking up at the stars and sort of cogitating the moon and the stars really for the very first time in this human form, and being very, very conscious of the sun, moon, and stars in that context, just looking up at the sky. And it must have been late one night in Rhodesia, in Zimbabwe. But that must have been earlier than 6 months of age. I do have a bit of a recollection prior to that, a few weeks earlier, when I was in a carry cot on a park bench, looking at my siblings playing. Again, this was in Africa. And being very angry that I wasn't able to join them,
Oh.
and having a bunch of shoes lined up alongside me on a park bench. And curiously enough, a photograph was taken of that, which I saw a couple of years later when I was old enough to kind of make sense of all of that. And I was crystal clear about the memory. So I was cursed or blessed to have a very liquid memory from a matter of a few months old. The curse is connected to the fact that when you have that kind of liquid or sort of kind of quantum recall from being not quite in the womb, but certainly is very soon coming out of the womb. The problem is that time is dilated when you are very young, for the first few years of life. Certainly for the first couple of years, time is dilated in much the same way that time dilates when you're very old and you're sitting in a rocking chair with a cuckoo clock on the wall.
Yeah.
Time dilates as well, and the afternoons become really long.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for grandkids to come or to someone to phone.
Yeah.
So I do. The curse was that by the age of 7, 8, 9, I felt like an old man.
Oh my goodness. How old were you when you realized that adults are really stupid? I was 7 when I got it completely clear in my mind, but how old were you?
Well, I think I must have been a year or two, and picking up on the energetic field of alcohol and lots of cigarette smoke and alcohol in the room, and that I didn't grow up with drunks by any stretch of the imagination, but it was in a war, and there were a lot of mercenaries around, and it was a lot of guns and camouflage and people drinking hooligan juice, and a lot of raucous kind of let's get through this together. So there was that kind of weird vibe that I used to pick up in the home when I was very young, and I recognized there was a certain stupefaction in that state of it was just out of coherence with the sort of typhonic consciousness that I was more or less closer to.
So you mentioned the war, Zimbabwe, Rhodesia. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what the memories were of it starting, and how you as a child looking through your eyes, apart from obviously you just mentioned about the stupidity of the drink around you and the hoarseness and the harshness of humanity, but what was it like for a little tender boy, a child?
it was really fucking horrible. But you know, I've spoken to this many times. Number one, I don't want to romanticize or glamorize my own backstory. In its way, it was mundane. It was, you know, small white, you know, generational white African kid getting caught in the crossfire in a sub-Saharan African war, which was part of the extension of the Cold War playing out for the resources of Africa between the Western motherfuckers and the communist motherfuckers. So that's what it was. And it took me many decades to work that shit out and understand how that Babylonian chessboard plays out. But I don't want to romanticize or glamorize, but I will say it was pretty awful in the main, more so because I think I was born, in a sense, uniquely sensitive for that kind of environment. And to that extent, it was hell. I could see other kids, even at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I could see them not enjoying it, but just getting on with being kids and playing toy guns and, you know, throwing toy grenades and, you know, talking about who got shot on the weekend on the farm, you know, because people were dying, kids were dying, and we were getting back to school and finding out so-and-so was killed, they were shot, you know, what, it was real. And then seeing, you know, bodies in the nets and the helicopters flying over, you know, frequently, and just going to bed with the sound of machine gun fire and sleeping behind grenade screens and so on. You know, one was in the thick of it, for sure. But it wasn't fun for me because I think I carried into the world a sort of slightly more refined sensitivity and sensibility. And I thought, what the fuck is this? You know, where have I landed? Like, really? This is it? Yeah. But anyway, one gets to appreciate very deeply later in life this backstory, especially insofar as it became the backstory to burn my guts so much and create such fire in my belly that later in life, all I became concerned about was remedy and about ensuring remedy, not seeking it, ensuring it, enforcing it.
Yes.
That's my what the French would call my raison d'être, or my basse métier, my reason for being, my reason for living.
Yes. And your ass-kicking self. Wow. So you mentioned other siblings. So were mom and dad around together growing up with siblings? And what kind of a house did you live in?
No, I didn't meet my father till I was about 16 or 17, when I was refugeed to England. And he's a delightful man, a wonderful man. My mum I grew up with, but she was hanging out of helicopters on the front line as a kind of war correspondent, come news anchor, come media pin-up star, forces favorite, you know, so you know, radio DJ, television chat show host. She was out there on the front line keeping the spirit of the forces and the people alive. And so she was pulled in multiple directions. She was young and beautiful as well, still is. She's my mum, she'll always be young and beautiful. But it was she was not there. She was not often there, nor could she be in real terms. You know, there were periods of up to a year where I never saw her.
Oh my goodness.
And that's not good kid, for sure. I know she's felt more plagued by that in later life than ever I've been. I'm grateful for having survived that war, and I'm grateful for having my family more or less come through unscathed, you know.
That's incredible. I love how you lit up energetically when you mentioned your dad, said what a lovely man he is, even though it was a long journey to finally get to meet him. And then your mom, you just glowed and bloomed. I love that. So you understand the DNA, obviously. Do you think that you're more like your mom or your dad? Your mom's hanging out helicopters and saving the world.
No, my mom's got a lot more balls than I am ever capable of conjuring in this world. So no, I'm definitely more like my father. I think we look similar, we talk similar, our voices are similar, we have similar predilections. I know he's become very sensible in his later years, and he's settled down with a beautiful wife, and he's very happy. I think it's his 12th wife or something. I'm being facetious. He's had a few, put it that way. And no, And no, he's not Mr. fucking Rockefeller, you pieces of shit trolls out there. You know, I've heard the rumors, I've read the things, and if I find you, I'll break your fucking nose for causing such damage to my, to my
Oh,
family's reputation. I'm so sick. Mind you, I have a 0 point tolerance now of these salamanders and trolls, and I will
yeah,
cut heads off when I see them now. But
yeah,
the point is that my family are alive and well, and I'm very blessed,
yeah.
blessed by all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. I just feel like it's such a beautiful thing. So I've never heard you say about your mum, being a real supporter of the troops, hanging out of helicopters, being a war correspondent, and being this really strong. Because one of my questions is always, and would have been right now, like, who were your greatest influences growing up? Because it's such an important question for us all.
Yeah, well, so that's a curious one. There were kind of mercenary, bush pilot type guys that I could see as a kid growing up, and it was a lot of guns and raucousness. But I did look up to those kinds of Indiana Jones type mercenary military guys that I grew up around, and I looked up to them, and I still do, and I still have a deep and abiding, I wouldn't say respect, but affinity for good military guys, good people, not in uniform, but good people who are on the front lines doing what they believe to be right action. So I
Mm,
have that kind of affinity. Those were my sort of totemistic heroes. My grandfather was a huge hero of mine. He was more of a kind of empire builder, sort of latter day colonialist, good man, foundationally a very good man, in his way powerful, in his way rich, in his way, very, very successful. And certainly he was the kind of patriarch of the family. And I really loved the man desperately. He
mm,
was a little removed, but I always loved him, up to the point where the morning that he died, he visited me, and I literally woke up, with my arms around him as I received a phone call saying that he died. So there was a complete affinity there as well.
mm.
I didn't have, outside of that, I didn't grow up with television sets. I didn't grow up with all of that stuff. So I didn't have icons and idols outside. It was just more what was in my immediate sphere of influence.
Immediate, how beautiful. And was that grandfather on your mum's side or your dad's side?
Yeah, on my mum's
Mum's
side.
side.
My grandfather on my dad's side died in an airplane. He was a pilot, and many of my family have died in airplanes. It's one of those
Wow.
weird. It's a weird thing. So many people that my family and also people connected closely to me. I think 7 or 8 have died in airplanes. It's like one of these weird things connected to
Mm,
my family. I don't know what it is. I feel now okay about it. I was, very afraid of flying for years. Now I really enjoy it, and I've got to the point I've kind of spellbinded myself into just really being okay with the idea of plunging 37,000 feet. It just really doesn't scare me anymore. I'm really so okay about the now. I've
mm,
sat with it. I've been through terrible turbulences. I've been through aborted landings, horrible shit, on planes, and in the last 10 odd years. And every time that happens, I'm so chill, I'm so okay. I can look out the window and go, it's a very fine day to die. And
mm.
that, carrying that sense of again, the geometry of now, this kind of serendipity about the isness of the here and the now, is
Yeah.
such a beautiful thing
Mm,
to have achieved in my own I guess, psycho-emotional body. And I recommend to anyone on earth that they ultimately get themselves into that state, because you really cannot be panicked. And I think I only did this because I was so panicked as a child. There were so many things that went bang, and so many really fucking scary bogeymen
yeah.
lurking under the bed, behind the grenade screens, out in the bush. Every time we got in cars, it was shooting, driving shotgun in convoys with military guys with machine guns, and in landmine vehicles, and just waiting to be blown up, waiting to be shot. You extrapolate that to 15 years or 16 years of a child's formative growth, and there's a certain fucking paranoid reflex there.
Yeah.
And so I had I had to really work at that later in life, and I
Yeah.
did, and I'm there. Yeah.
Bless you. I mean, that is, I'm a therapist too, so understanding how the, physiology, psychology of the body, mental mind, and that is a chronic state of adrenal pressure, adrenal explosion. I
Yeah.
mean, I wonder what your adrenals were like as a child. Bless your heart. You mentioned siblings earlier. Like, who were you around? Were you close to a particular sibling growing up before you left at
Well,
16?
my sister was really my beloved, and still is to
Mm,
some extent. We're close in age and temperament. I mean, she's a lot more kind of neurotic than I am, but she's a beautiful, beautiful woman, very, very talented. I mean, insanely talented, and still out there, really just conjuring her own manifestations in this world. And she's a wonderful, wonderful soul. Close to her as a child, she was the closest thing to me. She was the only thing that I knew I could reach out to and touch in the dark.
oh, darling. Oh, bless you. So currently living in Bali, as you were growing up in this war-torn environment, I'm very tempted to go into conversation because BoobTube have given me 2 strikes because they're such babies and bullies. I'm trying to be mindful of where I go, but I think it's really important, someone like you who's actually been in a war-torn environment. And I know in Ukraine, there's all kinds of puppetry going on and all kinds of nonsense. I spoke to somebody in England. She's like, we fucking hate Putin. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. And because of the brainwashing, we know that. But there are some real situations. I do know a man on the ground there who's been helping people get out of Ukraine and cross over to Poland. So clearly there are some awful, terrible things happening.
Well, let's
What
look at it.
I
Can
was
we
going
talk about
to, oh, absolutely, but I was going to ask you, the children who are seeing horrible things and who are frightened, you as a child, now adult, how would you advise parents and the people like to stay calm or to not?
I'm not about to give any advice to parents in the Ukraine. In the first instance, it's a complete simulation war theater. So
Mhm.
your friend in England who you spoke to, and with all due respect, is just a delightful imbecile. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And if she hates Putin, it means she hates herself. She's just unable to cogitate for herself that which is real from that which is fictitious. And that's understandable. We've all been mind-fucked sufficiently. But that notwithstanding, Putin is an enlightened man and an enlightened leader. Just happens to be thus. And I'll take anyone on in this. And I do have friends, very dear ones, who are vehemently opposed to Putin, but they don't understand anything about the real backstory to Russia and to what's happened in the last 25 years. I've
Mhm.
got Russian liberal intellectuals, the kind of fringe oligarchy, who all hate Putin's guts. Of course they do. He was the one that snatched back the purse that they stole from Middle Russia,
Right.
part of the whole asset seizure
Yeah.
and the land grab and the gold grab and the money grab that happened through the filthy technocratic oligarchy at the back end of the fall of the wall of Berlin. People don't understand who Putin is. If you can, disassociate from one's own inane political or intellectual sensibilities and just see that which self exists, it is crystal clear. Vladimir Putin is a highly enlightened individual and a very beautiful human being. How do you deduce that? One, you look with your fucking eyes and you see what you see, not what you think you see, or not what you're informed that you should be seeing. And yet then you listen to the words that come out of the man's mouth. You value the measure and the value and the weight of his syntax. And then you read the transcripts of his actual words as he's speaking them in real time, not scripted. This
Mhm.
is not dreamt up by a bunch of pricks in Whitehall who are
Mhm.
writing the scripts for the next puppet show.
Yeah.
This is a living man who happens to be inhabiting a throne, and a vital one. Russia represents the soul of humanity, always has since the days of ancient Tartaria. That regenesis story of corrected history is about to come back into the
Mhm.
frame. In the
Yeah.
next 5, 7, 10 years, it's going to be
Mhm.
one of the most seminal things, the remembrance of our lost history and the subversion caused by the Sabbateans in the last 150 years, essentially. Okay, I could wax lyrical and lecture on this for hours and hours and hours. The bottom line being this: We're living in the devil's checkerboard right now, where people are so stupefied and so stupid, they think that white is black and black is white. They think that Boris Johnson and democracy and the American Medical Association and the World Health Organization are on the side of humanity, and they think that Putin's on the wrong side. Wrong. Flip the script 180 degrees. Putin is the one man standing between this planet right now and catastrophic failure of all systems. That's a fact.
Yeah. And the thing is, until it's so difficult for people because they don't know what they don't know till they know it, you know, and it can take such a while and such a time. And I know most of us have given up screaming, saying, don't do this and don't believe this. And it's going to be what it's going to be now. And it's going to be so unsettling and shocking for so many people. And it's the most unbelievable thing because like Putin and Trump have been made to look like the biggest twats on the planet, long-term hounding, long-term pounding. Exactly. That's all you have to do.
Every word, every printed word, every published word on the air, on the airwaves. Who controls all the images? These are the Sabbatean crypto Khazarian mafia motherfuckers operating out of Geneva, Long Island, London, Gstad, and Tel Aviv. Okay, say no more. And no, this is not a Jewish thing, baby. This is a crypto Jewish thing. Get to grips with that story. It's all subversion, all of it. It's dirty, dirty, dirty tactics. Study up on who the trustees are, the board of directors, the CEO, the publishers and the owners of Agence France Presse, Reuters, all of the FP, all of the prime media agencies and arteries, all owned and controlled by the same little clutch of deviants. So I call them Sabbateans because it's what they are. They are saboteurs. And they are the net of imperial hegemony, of priest bankers, of the Babylonian Mysterium cult. They've cherry-picked their way through history, all the religious myths, all the Gnosticism. They've cherry-picked it to suit them. And they're at this point now where they control Islam, they control the Catholic Church, they control Judaism, they control Hinduism in India, and they've turned the world into their own fucking little game, checkerboard game. That's where we're at. So the only way out of that labyrinthine deception is to either flip the script. So when you're told Putin's evil, flip it 180 degrees and you're 50% closer to the truth, number one. But most people are not equal to that kind of conversation, alas.
Yeah, it's so true. And there are so many videos, broadcast information, people sharing their thoughts. And for me, I keep saying to myself, well, you know what? The only thing you can really trust in this day and age is inside of you, like first gut response.
Right.
You know, and again, we're so programmed. We've been on, I call it being on the wonk. We've been on the wonk. We've been programmed to see what a good person is purposefully. And the main monster that I use in reference to that is that pedophile necrophiliac. Oh, said the P word. Oh dear, the fucktards might take me down. One of those and one of those, boob tube. Honestly, it makes me so cross. But Jimmy Savile. So because you know, Saturday night, Britain, mum, dad, brothers, sisters, everyone sits down and watches Jimmy Savile because he's going to fix it for you. He's going to make all the children's dreams come true. Come, little children, come sit round my red chair. Let me give you the red medal that says I'll fix it for you, raping horror. And he is the sickest man. And so I always remember thinking as a kid, he looks a bit weird, but the Queen loves him. He looks a bit weird, but he's running marathons and raising money. And who knew what he was doing behind the scenes?
My mother did. My mother told me in 1983, I remember it clearly. 1983, I was watching some version of Jim Will Fix It that had finally hit the shores of Africa and on TV. And I remember my mother saying, turn that box off. I said, what are you talking about? She said, that's a dirty pedophile, that man. I said, what do you mean? This is Jim Will Fix It. And my mother said, no. And she knew exactly who Jim Will Fix It was. She knew who he was because of her own days in BBC and in London radio when she was out here, earlier in the 1970s. And she knew at that time who they all fucking knew who Jimmy Savile was. And you think the establishment and MI5 and MI6, that perfidious, pernicious little touch of deviance with $1 trillion war machine at their behest, you think those sons of bitches didn't know? They know. You think the judicial, the entire justice system in the United Kingdom, the entire Privy Council in the United Kingdom, rotten to the core, and they fucking know it, a lot of them. And they also know we're coming for them. They've run out of ammo. There is little else they can do. They've done their best against me using their tools in Scotland Yard and Trading Standards Authority and the fucking BBC and corrupt judges. They tried to take me down 18 months ago. I've still not talked about that. I've still not gone public and talked about that. We know what their dirty tricks are, how dastardly they are, these creatures. The fact of the matter is, darling girl, their day is over.
And that right there is a true statement, my love, a true statement. So in terms of the fucktards that have been running my planet, your planet, our planet for so long, I sent a message out to one of the little Nazi shitheads. Again, just said a word, that YouTube doesn't like. And I'm not going to name his name because he's really not that value. I don't see the value in even saying the name. But I remember watching this little white horror monster on a world forum that he created himself, that he had the audacity to stand up there and say, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And when I saw that, I had my blood boiled, and I had so many different paths. I had memories drop in the moment, like stick it up your ass, you stupid old man. Don't you dare tell me what to do and how to live my life. And it was so interesting because, they know how to spell. And anyone that thinks there's no such thing as dark magic, black magic, witchery, etc., witchcraft, oh my God, that's something else that we've been carefully steered away from. And with religion, like, if you say you're talking to angels or devils, that means there's something wrong with you and you're going to go to hell. So we've all been programmed and terrorized and emotionally paralyzed into a state of thinking and beingness. And it's people like you, out there kicking balls and, lining people up and putting them in, in rooms on hold. That is so needed right now. And I know people might view you as a bit of a nut job, same as me. They might think
I don't know that they can. Listen, slow that thought down.
Okay.
The kind of person who is inane or stupid enough to express the notion that I'm a nut job is somebody who doesn't do grammar, somebody who doesn't do syntax, somebody who can't compute 1 + 1, somebody who doesn't understand world affairs, somebody who doesn't understand history, somebody who doesn't understand biochemistry. So no, people don't think I'm a nut job. Stupid people may do, but we're not concerned with stupid people, are we? We can't be. Besides, they've all been a quadruple vax and they're on their way shuffling off this mortal coil. So that inane frequency bandwidth of the stupid human, the idiot human, is no longer with us. They've already put themselves on a death spiral of extinction. And there's a certain symmetry and beauty to that, I have to say. But I'm not concerned about them. I'm really concerned about good people, about good humans, really concerned about those who are affirmative and are living in some sense of gratitude to people like me. So I don't hear those voices any longer. I'm just hearing them kind of dimly recede, It's of no consequence any longer.
No, and that's clever because that's a lot, suggests that you've done a lot of inner work and nothing holds you back. You're a prisoner of no one's emotional thought or opinion of you. But you know what does happen in the brain because of the programming from the moment we're born, and we hear it in vitro and out we come. And then we're dealing with all this fuckery around us from our parents and all that generational stuff. You hear one word and that neural pathway that is calcified into knowing how to trigger, so let's say, for example, you're this outspoken warrior on the planet, and the British people, there are some without any intelligence or education, that instant neural pathway is triggered. And then we're taking it like the Jimmy Savile thing. We're so on the wonk, we're so skewed that we don't even know how to recognize, most of us, who a good person is. I look at some of the American presidents. I lived there for years. I could not believe how duped I was. And I thought I was a fairly smart person. And then I'm like, oh, damn it, Danny, you did it again. You fell for the old tugging on the heartstrings, the emotional connection. They know exactly what they're doing. That's why it's so difficult for so
Oh,
many
yeah.
people to even comprehend or apprehend their own feelings, because they're kind of
Yeah.
dragged into this portal of this door over here for here's a good fucking person, and oh, this door over here for bad people. And you don't know what the hell you do, and you don't know your
Well,
ass from your elbow.
that's the point. That's the point of Helter Skelter. So even if, as you said, you are a smelly fart person, sorry, a fairly smart person, but then, but that's Babylonian. There's Babylonian lingo right there. You just
Yes.
flip it, you flip it, and it's the inversion logic which prevails today.
Yeah.
It's everywhere you look, which is why we are in a realm now populated with idolaters, and those who are idolaters and are still worshiping at the golden calf will perish. There is no way possible that they can sustain frequency and move in and inherit this new earth that is fast emerging. It's not possible. People who are still indentured to these false light icons, to iconoclasticism, to the television screens, to the smartphone screens, to the AI virtual simulations of their own lives, to consumerism, to mainstream media, mainstream academia. All of that describes the totemism of the false light. You are in deep, deep trouble if you're still indentured to any of that bullshit. That's the point. A meek human, the ones who inherit the earth, are the ones by distinction and definition who can walk and stand barefoot upon the sacred soil and can reconvene a relationship with the telluric forces of the inner earth and can reconfigure a relationship with the angelic forces of the dielectric universe and can recognize within themselves that they are the Atman, the living sons and daughters of God.
Beautiful. Oh, I need to lie down after that. Just kidding. I just love the way you express and you lay it all out and you lay it all down like that. It's an absolute joy, a joy to see. So I know that, and we're going off into all different directions of what's currently happening in what we are told to call present time or real time. I would still love to journey a little bit more into that little child, that little boy that was from one area on the planet, went through all of this bombastic horror and violence to coming through. And I asked you about influences, and you alluded to the fact that there wasn't much television in your house. So can you share with us, were there any particular books that you read that had influence on your mind growing up?
Well, that's where my mum was magnificent there. So, and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and his Little Prince was kind of foisted into my hands.
Yeah.
Kafka, Kafka was foisted onto me. The Russian classics, Dostoevsky, and
Dostoevsky.
all of them were forced upon me as a child, more or less. What was the thing that was most impressed upon me? I would need to actually sit with that, but I'm just lucky at the Upanishads. Yeah, there we go, the Upanishads. So the Hindu Vedas, they were foisted onto me as well, as a child, and that really helped me. By the age of 14, 15, 16, I was the devotee of a master, a great master, a very great master, Charan Singh Ji, who, those of you who know who Maharaj Charan Singh Ji is, knows exactly who I'm talking about. I did meet him when I was 14 or 15, and he was my master for at least 10 years until he died. But that was a very, very great avatar, that man. So what pushed me into that form of mystical tradition was really my mum allowing me and my sister full expression and just saying, hey, follow whatever sits well, whatever feels good. And I'm very grateful at that. I've come later in life to understand more of the Christ message, and I'm not enthralled to any gurus whatsoever. After beloved Maharaj Charan Singh Ji died, that was for me pretty much it. I then went on to understand Guru and understanding what that particular form of interventionism represents in the journey of the human being. But I arrived really at a point where I really want all gurus, heads taken off. I just have no time for guru anymore. None.
No, not at all.
And that's why I've also done a not so great job of trying to prevent my own cult of personality from being cultivated at the front end of the initiatives that I've founded. And that's a difficult task, because the one thing that people have a predisposition to do in life is to idolize, is to revere. I pulled out of, shaking my dick around on stage in hot pants when I was, in rock and roll. I pulled out of that stupid game because I saw the false light equation there, and
Right.
I saw the psychosexual blowback, and it didn't impress me at the spiritual level, put it that way.
Yeah, it's very difficult for a lot of people because of the fuckery in the programming from in vitro to out. And then, oh my God, you'll be bombarded with the programs. I remember when I was in television in England, I told you earlier, that I walked down the street and people would recognize me. I would be so embarrassed and butt clenching and thinking, oh my God. But it was so awkward to see people unravel, like grown women unravel and say, I follow you, I do everything. And it wasn't me. It was the program in them that says, if you see someone on TV that you feel inspired by, they are a demigod, a god, someone to worship. And these are the things that we're undoing publicly across the entire world. These are the kind of messages that are so important, because people are devaluing themselves so much. We are the same on all of these levels. I wanted to mention a word. You said the word guru, and I've also studied the Hindu. Oh my God, I love the Hindus so much. And there's a beautiful temple on the island of Kauai. It's called the Arabian Temple. It was hand built. The holy swamis came. They chiseled that stone out of the mountain, understanding if they dynamited it, it would then charge it with a certain frequency energy. They came across gently from India to Kauai. They hand built this beautiful. It is the closest kind of Tartarian model of anything I've seen in the modern world in my whole life. And on the beautiful stonemasonry, there is a particular symbol. And if you look at it, it's a swastika, except it's not. It is the original beautiful emblem, the Hindu sacred mark, that obviously Hitler, that tosser, flipped around, inverted, as we know. But that's just so beautiful. And that's such a beautiful place to go. And the guru thing, recently, I've been to LA, I've sat in front of them, I've been looking through my third eye, scanning the body, thinking, there's no one there, mate. There's no one there. Oh, you're going to turn your body into light? I don't think so. All those kinds of things. But anyway, bless them. It was a theme for a while. It was a trend for some to continue to mull. Then recently someone said, have you heard of Swaru? I'm like, no, Swaru. And I didn't bother looking it up because I knew it was just another bullshit program in the community. And I sat there and I thought, well, if I look at that name, those words, someone's put together Swami, holy man, and Guru together. They've come up with Swaru. Oh, let's go popping along now and listen to Swar fucking Roo and follow him because he's the new Christ. Come on. At this stage now, surely to God, you got more than half a bean in your brain and you're going to start going, there's repetitive patterns here. There's emotional paralysis here. There's the same kind of people coming out attacking each other with the same narratives. What the fuck's going on? Slow yourself down. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there you go. Idolaters, a lot of them. That's the problem. Any form of intercessionary or intervention and interventionism speaks to the same malignancy. And that unfortunately describes the status quo, describes the civilizational model. If you figure that teachers are standing in between kids and their true knowing and their true remembering and their true learning, and doctors and nurses are standing between people and their true health and healing, and lawyers are standing between people and true natural justice and remedy, and accountants and bookkeepers are standing between people and their true wealth. They're just functionaries for the government. That's what bookkeepers and accountants are.
Yeah.
They and governments themselves are the Babylonian priesthood made manifest, standing between humans and basic foundational liberty, and the churches themselves are standing between humans and their redemption and their salvation. So go figure. Everything speaks to that malignancy of intercessionarism and interventionism. And we need to now wholeheartedly and wholesale step out of that indentureship. That's the point of the now, is to step back and say, we no longer require alien intervention and genetic hybridization. We no longer require governments and church intervention. We no longer require governance at all. We certainly don't require academia or media to tell us and to transcribe for us or to translate for us the images on the screen of life. We need to now step into our organic affinity with the sacred soil and remember our immanence, remember our divinity, and then take forth our true God capacitance, which is to affirm, to expand, and to create limitlessly.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Each and every one has that ability, that responsibility to self, to love, to go in and to never, ever, ever look outside it. But sadly, so many refuse. They're too, bothered about what someone's going to think about them. Going back a little bit, again, this is such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being there late at night and me early morning here in Costa Rica. Even the monkeys aren't awake yet, darling. I've heard no growling and howling out there. I wanted to again just journey down that little part of your world which had massive impact. But again, you mentioned the beautiful books, and it's an interesting thing, isn't it? People like Dostoevsky, like and people that you Kafka. It's so beautiful, the indelible imprint that kind of literature leaves on us. And then there's another side, that's like, oh, that's academic snobbery. Is it really? And people are like, I can't read that kind of literature because I'm not educated, or I grew up in a council house, and again, so sad for people to put those limits on themselves. To me, self-responsibility, when people stop fucking blaming their situations from beginning to this moment and just go, I'm going to invite myself to read this, to listen to this, to watch this. And I remember years ago, I love a boyfriend I had. I'd be sitting in bed like reading, and he would dare to lean over, never read a book himself. He'd lean over, take his finger, stick it on the page and say, huh, that book's insulting. And I'd be thinking, you twat. Of course, I'm no longer with said person. But it's little things like that, how people are so easily shut down. They start going on discovery, and some arsewet comes along who's going to be threatened by the changes in the person that they're with. They can't have that. Oh, let's control that. Oh, my goodness me. So books, brilliant. Again, everyone, come on, start reading, start asking questions. But Sacha, most of us as teenagers, we in our bedrooms, if we're lucky enough to have a bedroom without bloody bullets being fired at, grenade shells, we have posters or such like in our room. Take us into that bedroom of that young boy, that young man. What was your room like? What were your precious things that you were attached to?
I didn't have that kind of a childhood. I was going to say unfortunately, but let me underscore fortunately. I did not have that kind of childhood. I didn't have birthday parties, and I didn't have the Christmas parties and that kind of nonsense. And I'm very, very grateful to my mother, much as it was my chagrin at the time when I was very young. I think I must have been 3 or 4. And I do actually remember her putting a little Christmas tree up and turning to me and my sister and saying, all right, you little fuckers. She didn't say that. But it was kind of in the tone. She said, this is the first and last time we're doing this nonsense, this Christmas thing, so enjoy it. And we were like, oh, but she hit that shit on the head. She hit that shit right on the head when I was 3 or 4. And I am so, so grateful to my mum for that. To this day, I despise birthdays. And I'll tell you why. Because I've learned enough to know that it is TikTok Gregorian time signatures that we repeat to ourselves at the psychological level that programs death and entropy into the DNA. Mm-hmm. I now know that to be a fact. I'm something of an expert on this subject of the kind of hyperdimensional physics and the spiritual dimension of the fiction of time. It's been my big bugbear in my adulthood, and I speak very boldly to the archonic, lower elemental aspects of the lords of time, and how the lords of time are the very emissaries of Yaldabaoth that create demonic interventionism and possession of humanity. And tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. You're running out of time, baby. You're running out of oxygen. You're running out of life force. You better be in a state of fear, a state of siege. That is the entire tapestry and orchestra of evil right there, codified in one thing and one thing alone, and that is 1260 time signature. So
Mm.
the idea that we've compartmentalized and sequestered a quantum reality into TikTok, 1260 time, 12 months, this, that, and the other, all of which is an absolute lie, does not reflect the true rhythms and cycles of the galaxy, much less the planet. All of that is Babylonian witchery. It is satanic ritualism that's been cast as a thrall, a dragnet over humankind
Mm-hmm.
for many centuries now. And that's a real problem. That's why we die. That's why ancient Tartaria and the imminent golden age died, because of how time was stealthily installed as a program. So when my mother told us kids at 3 or 4 years of age, that's it, we don't celebrate birthdays. We will celebrate every day as being a birthday if you like, but we're not going to be playing into that. I am eternally grateful to the woman for that gift.
Mm. Did your mother, was she influenced by any kind of religion, or was she just such a big picture, big thinker, global understander at such a young age?
My mother is the worst idolater on the planet, but she idolizes simplicity in nature. So
Mm.
my mother has turned cultivating, the tap roots of some fucking weed in the Algarve, living between two cracks in a rock, and cultivating that thing into a blooming flower in the desert of southern Portugal. That's her zen. Her gardening is her zen, and she is a master at it. So I would say she's the biggest idolater of all, but she does it where it matters and where it has true impact, which is to convene relationship with the simplistic, most elemental aspect of being human and being alive. And I think that's profoundly wise and beautiful.
It's so beautiful. When you say the flower in the crack, the weed in the crack. I remember years ago, this beautiful lady, she's passed on. She was an Estonian princess, and the Nazis took her and her family, her mum, her dad. Her mum was pregnant with her brother, and they survived six death camps with their physical bodies, yes, but there was a lot of course, terrible, dreadful, awful harm. And her name is Dr. Mayu Soro Espinosa. It's funny, she ended up marrying a brilliant brain surgeon who was a count, an actual count, as she became a countess. A count. She's the most wonderful person pretty much that I've ever met one of in my life. And her mother would take her sisters and her brother and walk around the camp, and the finite, the most simple weed flower in the crack that would come through, and her mother would have her and the girls sit and look and ponder while there were all manner of horrors occurring around them. And there's such a strength in that, and such beauty in that. You just reflowered that memory in my mind. Thank you for that, talking about your mother.
She was very wise. She was very wise. And,
Mm.
what she was doing was she was identifying coherence, albeit a very slender aspect of coherence, natural law, natural function, which is coherence, in the midst of an insane, incoherent dystopia of those concentration camps and in that particular environment at that time, which was beyond toxic. So, all strength to her. What a blessed soul.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So anything else in the childhood, the unprogramming that we beautifully went through without probably realizing until now you look back, you can make that comparison through life, how blessed you were to have a mom who was so ahead of her time. You mentioned going to meet your father, 16, 17. Is there anything you want to share up until that moment? And then can you share that moment, meeting your dad for the first time?
It was fun. I mean, he's like I said, he's a great guy, and very handsome and very funny and very charming and very intelligent. And he picked us up. I think we flew into England. My mum spent about a week there with us, and she was literally handing us kids over to my dad as refugees, de facto refugees.
Mm.
And then she was flying back to Africa to try and retrieve the family and what was left of our lives there. Which was the tailspin at the end of the war into the last couple of years that we were staying in Southern Africa. And the day of handing over to my dad was quite memorable to me because they chose Waterloo Station in London, under the Paddington Bear clock. And my dad was there, and he picked me and my sister up and took us out and in his car and drove us to his beautiful 17th century manor house in Norfolk, and we moved in there, and he gave he gave me a wing in the house, which was haunted as fuck.
Really? That's brilliant.
It really, it was the
Brilliant.
bane. It was terrifying for me. I've never even confessed this to my father, but the reason I
Oh,
bolted, the reason I bolted a few weeks later and left was because it felt very haunted to me, and I was terrified
oh,
in the place. But it was beautiful, and he gave me a motorbike and gave me a car and did all the right things a dad's going to do to a 15, 16-year-old kid. And but I didn't see much of him. He was kind of not really there that much, and spent a little bit of time when I did see him coming in and out. But that was the end of it. And I think I lasted about 6, 7, 8 weeks or something there. And my sister was there as well, and she chose to live in the houseboat. She didn't want to be in the house,
mm,
and we both at a given point decided we were going to try our luck in London, and we sort of bolted back to London from Norfolk, and pretty kind of not knowing what was going to come next. And then we threw ourselves on the mercy of our grandfather, who was still in Africa, and he gave us one of his properties, a house in Surrey in England. It was probably the very worst house that he had, but he gave that to us, and we moved into that little
oh,
house. And my sister promptly fucked off a couple of months later because she found a man in London and moved in with him. And to this day, they're not together now still, but they're still very close. And
oh.
I ended up living alone in that house, which was also as haunted as fuck, and it was terrifying.
Oh my God.
I mean, honestly, so haunted that people would come and stay, just to observe the ghosts and hear and see the poltergeist activity. It became a thing. So I had to get over that.
Mm,
I then subsequently, a couple of years into that, because we're now talking about my late teens, I began to recognize that this poltergeist activity was connected to me.
yeah.
And that it's kind of wherever I was, it was going to conjure that stuff into manifestation. Because I then went traveling for a year with a master in Germany. Forgive me, in Holland. We met up in Holland, and he took me for a year traveling in Europe. And he was a mentor. Came from a very, very bizarre school of mystical tradition out of Suriname, Paramaribo in Suriname. He was in a sense, a magician. It was not black magic. It was what you would loosely call white magic.
Mhm.
But for 1 year, this man took me under his wing, and I traveled with him. And that I must have been now 19, roundabout there. And in that 1 year, I learned enough about demonism and the angelic hosts and about that language. And he helped me to anchor that stuff. And I saw a lot of very, very bizarre stuff in that year. I was witness and privy to a lot of stuff, as well as engaging with disembodied spirits and things. I'm not saying that I was doing incantations and witchcraft. I wasn't doing that stuff, but I was next to a master who was a practitioner of high arts in what you would call white magic, undoing Babylonian spells. He was a
Mm,
Rastafari, essentially. And being close to that man, and meeting in Europe many very, very strange people involved in those practices, mystics. I witnessed some extraordinary things in that year, and that was really the most formative year of my life, because when I then, at the end of that year, he told me he was taking me for 1 year. He said, "At the end of the year, I'm disappearing. You won't see me again," and that happened. And I was cast adrift, and I had my heart broken.
oh, yeah.
I love this. I love this man.
Mm,
But that year was the most formative year of my life. It was a very powerful thing to witness the demonic and the angelic spectrum of the realm of possibility as it
yeah.
relates to my life and humanity and humankind and our
Yeah.
planet. And that was really the seeding of in my own life, of the limitlessness of expression, and for me to be able to therefrom make a determination about, does one anchor one's life, one's journey, one's path, so to speak, into self-aggrandizement, into acquisition or acquisitiveness, in accumulating stuff and things and fame and celebrity and gold and chicks and whatever else, or conversely, does one from this point on situate oneself on that indivisible line, that duende line between this and that on the checkerboard of life, not going. And this is what I learned from the kind of Blavatsky school, the Helena Petrovich Blavatsky school of theosophy, which is why when people hammer theosophy too much, I kind of pull out my own big stick and beat their brains out, because you can hammer Blavatsky all you like. I was never into Crowley. I never did the Aleister Crowley thing. It was too creepy for my liking.
Yeah.
But Blavatsky, a different matter altogether, in my view. And that, of course, led to Krishnamurti. And when you understand Blavatsky and then you understand Krishnamurti, you understand this incredible beneficence that came with those brave, noble pioneers who fused the broken hemispheres between Eastern occultism and Western traditional Eastern mysticism and Western Gnosticism.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful stuff. So I had that all compressed into that 1 year with this master, and I'm eternally grateful to him. His name was Otis Lee, and I miss him to this very day.
Oh, Sacha, thank you. That's so beautiful. And, you know, so this beautiful man came at the right time and took you and showed you and let you stand alongside and revere everything he was there to be. And you were in the midst of the visible, the invisible, and the metaphysical. And it sounds like that was such a founding, grounding time for you. And then to have your beautiful heart broken, as all children, teenagers, sadly, we seem to go through those trials and tribulations.
Well, hang on, it wasn't that kind. It wasn't a sexual partnership.
No, so, God, no. I know that. No, you didn't give that off at all. It was a reverence. It was a respect. No, darling. No, right. No. Wow. And then mentioning Madame Blavatsky, God, she gets a rough old run of it, doesn't she? She really does. But
she really does. But she knew it at the time. Her life, she was stalwart, and she knew anyway that she was taking that, she was seizing that fire, and she was tough as nails. I mean, look at the bitch. Look how she looked.
Yeah.
She was fantastic.
Yeah.
I never forgive me. I never finished the point. The point was that at the end of that year, I was really given the toolkit to be able to make a determination about, do I move into a life of service to self or one of service to others, and position oneself on that duende line where you bear witness to life and you move forward only seeking remedy and seeking a higher outcome. And that's what I determined. And I determined to do that because of that incredible year that I'd experienced the angelic and the demonic. And I saw that if one engaged in that sense, the demonic realm, one could live in a kind of orgasmic Babylonian bestial kind of bliss and have as much gold and as you wanted, and as much affluence and power, temporal power. But at what cost? At what cost? And then I entered into the angelic realm in that year, and I was quite literally taken out of my body at one point by a host of what you would call angelics loosely, and imprinted in one afternoon, and in Cologne, in Germany. And it was in that state, disembodied state, where I was taken into the hyper realms, witnessing my body below me, my physical body, but taken into my star body, and able to experience this ecstatic, euphoric, celestine, past, future, present immanence. That euphoria with these angelic beings lasted maybe 2 hours or something thereabouts. And when I was returned into my body, they allowed me to play with my star body as I was descending into the physical body. And they allowed me to accelerate and decelerate the process of reconvention of the astral form and the causal and the physical form. And so I was able to witness with my physical eyes, because at that point my eyes and my body opened as well, and my star body eyes were open, and they were both in perfect phase conjugation. And I was able to recognize in one perfect moment of timelessness that time didn't exist, and that we were immanent and immortal, all of us, and that moreover, what I was going to experience in this temporal life was the mechanics of ascension as a real-time phenomenon, and that I needed to really pay attention in this incredible experience that they were offering me to learn about the mechanics of ascension. And that stuff, just so you know, 30 years later, I'm now just permitted to speak to, and I'm beginning to speak to that, which is why I now really confine my lectures and what have you, and the retreats I'm doing, to cosmogenesis, status quo, and the mechanics of ascension, and creating the alpha omega marriage between cosmogenesis and the status quo and the mechanics of ascension, because this is really the language of the trial of separation, why we fell away in the first instance, why the great fall, apocryphal fall, occurred in the first place. Like, really? Well, that's a motherfucker of a God. I want no part of that God. The angry, jealous Yahweh piece of shit with a long beard. I don't want any part of that God, and nor do I, incidentally. I do not. But that is not God. That is the opposite of God.
Yes.
That is antithetical to God and to grace and to the Christed light. I've learned that through hard medicine and hard logic. I've learned about that. But the mechanics of ascension are a biological fact. And we are moving now in the next few short years from a physical, biological form into a hyperdimensional celestine form. And we're going to be moving that from 3D into the so-called 5D. And I don't like that terminology.
Me neither.
Moving into an ascension event that's a physical ascension. There is no separation between mind, body, and soul. There is no separation whatsoever. None. And that's been the greatest misnomer of all, is this idea that spirit is over there and the causal is there, the astral is there, the physical is there. No, they are all unified in this great ascension event that we're about to witness. And one is able to right now already arrest one's own aging process. One is able to move into the immortal paradigm and into immanence. One is able to drink vibral light and transcode vibral light of the eternal limitless sky into the cellular system right now. And in fact, one must begin that process now. Under the fog of this covidiocy, this war, this stealth war against humanity by Yaldabaoth, this is precisely when we must retrieve ourselves and, like Lazarus, rise from the dead, which is why I call the latest thing I'm doing the Lazarus Initiative, why I call it that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Look, I'm going to come to that. Believe me, I don't want to leave any of the great humanitarian work that you're doing, and also bringing so many beautiful people and honoring them with you. I know, having them side by side. You mentioned a word that I know not too many people are really aware of at the moment, but it's something that's incredibly important. And that word or that name or that title is cosmogenesis. Could you briefly, although I know it's a magnificently massive subject, could you briefly just highlight, just so people can go and do some, some thinking and listening for themselves?
Happily. So cosmogenesis speaks to the alpha and the omega. It speaks to the atom seed of the angelic seeding, so to speak, or the atom seed of humanity. And we are the greatest living technology on the surface of the earth. Okay, we are an extraordinary technology, Homo sapiens sapien. Fact is that we are an angelic seeding that was then left cast adrift in the great abyss in order to be then seeded and counter-seeded and genetically mutated and interbred and hybridized by very advanced intelligences and technological civilizations that are out there in the void, in the great galactic void. And there's a reason for that. The angelics, we came here in order to absolve and redeem and help to forge the true fabric of soul amongst our galactic brethren over a long period of time. And that's where the myth of time comes in. And when we've finally awoken to the myth of time and we're entering the regenesis point of our cosmic journey, which we are right now, then we relinquish adherence to the lords of time, remember our Christed divinity, activate and fully actualize within the abyss as the sons and daughters of God,
And that's now our function, to become the diamond born in the coal of the abyss in the cauldron of creation. And in so doing, and in so remembering our divinity and re-identifying and actualizing that divine capacitance, we will be able to take with us back toward light, so to speak, trillions and trillions of souls in the formative stage, able to reconvene. This is how creation works. We are emissaries of the Godhead, cast adrift into the great abyss by divine soul covenant. How noble and brave each of us have been in that journey. But let's just now, in this darkness, in this great galactic sleep that we're awakening from, let's remember who we are and take back our divinity and start to wield that sword and fashion and forge creation. We should be steering planets and star systems with our ideation, with our plasma, because that's what we are. We are creators made flesh.
Definitely. You know, last night I put it on Facebook. I mean, the platforms amuse me. I have no respect for the ones that are controlled by the dark. And every time something gets taken down, I know there's fucktards running that. At some point it will be done, but right now it's all we have. But last night I was sitting here in Costa Rica, and this last night amongst many, 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 and the moon that's supposed to be over there is over there. And then a couple of hours later, it's there. I'm like, okay, well, you're going backwards again. Then it went back there again. And I'm like, I need for people to know and recognize, look up, look up, look at what is not happening, which we've been programmed to believe is happening, because we talk about space and stars and galactic interaction, all the rest of it. Yes. So I would love for you, I once heard you deliver an impassioned speech on where the moon came from. Would you be happy to share that with us?
On a speech on what? Forgive me.
Where the moon came from.
Yeah.
Let's really mess with people's heads today with love.
Well, you're curious. I had a delightful telephone call earlier, a Zoom call for about an hour with the brother of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Canada. That particularly sort of noxious sock puppet. But his brother, by contrast, is incredibly enlightened, very beautiful, beaming, shiny, living man of the living soil. What a tremendous soul. And thank Christ he is, because he'll be able to redeem that lineage, no doubt. But we were talking about Jose Arguelles, the great mystic, the reincarnation of the last of the Mayan high priests, because Trudeau's brother was saying to me, his name is Kyle Kemper, incidentally, and a very beautiful man he is. He was talking to me about his love for Jose Arguelles, and he said, have you ever heard of Jose Arguelles, the great mystic? And I said, have I heard of him? I said, he used to sit in the corner of my living room over there. He lived here for a time before he died. Many mystics have been here, and I mean many, like scores and scores of high priests and very advanced avatars and souls. I've been very blessed to meet a great many of them who've come and traveled to here and London over the last 20 odd years to meet with me. I'm very blessed in that. But in this particular case with Jose Arguelles, to get to the answer to your question, it was Jose Arguelles, the reincarnated last of the Mayan high priests, who was known as Pacal Votan or Valon Votan. And he was the man who really conjured up Dream Spell and the idea of the end of time, 2012, the end of the long count Tzolk'in of the Mayans. It was Jose Arguelles who decoded that in the 1970s. And his whole life was a complete mystery. But when he was staying here with his wand, his staff, and living here for a time, not long before he died, he educated me on the moon. And I remember then speaking impassioned to David Icke when he came to visit me in London. I think it was in 2007. And I remember imparting the same to David Icke, and we had a fantastic 7 or 8 hour conversation in my living room in London on the subject of the moon. So I can tell you that it's only since 2007 that I've known about the moon, which is what, 15 years, longer than most for sure. I then started to really begin to look in and understand it. I was then approached as Humanitarian Foundation by
the man who used to be one of the wealthiest men in the world, Alan Bond, the billionaire from Australia, who became a great friend of mine. And I loved Al Bond. I say great friend. I knew him well and socialized with him. He took me out to lunch a few times before he died. And he was a man who was one of the richest men in the world, who was a good human, who was taken down by the Babylonian priests because he wouldn't play ball with them. So, you know, one of those very powerful leadership figures in life that I've met who've imparted to me the truth of what goes on beneath. Sorry to go off track. I've known about the moon for 15 years. Alan Bond came to me in 2009, I think it was, asking, bringing some folks to meet with me. He knew the work I was doing in Humanitarian, and Bond wanted to finance a group of Russian cosmonauts and so retired cosmonauts and scientists who themselves wanted to repurpose the then failed Russian space program. They wanted to repurpose it to send rockets to the moon to mine for helium-3 and bring helium-3 back. Why? Because, you know, this room, half of this room filled, okay, it's a fairly big room, so maybe a third of the size of this room, filled with helium-3 from the moon, which you scoop up from the surface of the moon. A third of the room this size would power up the whole of the United States of America for a year. All the energy. So that's why Bond and these Russians were trying to repurpose and retool the failed Russian space program at that time to go and mine helium-3 on the surface of the moon and bring it back. So I started to do some hard studying because I was asked as Humanitarian to get on board with that program and help to, you know, this is 2 years before this is about the year actually that I was drafted into the United Nations as the Director General for the renewable energy sector. You know, unsalaried, refused to take a salary. I need to always caveat that. But I did agree to tango with that filthy organization because I was promised by the ambassadors that petitioned me that I would be able to have a voice in the UN and help to change the fabric of the UN, especially as it related to the so-called Millennium Development Goals, which I thought were foul at the time. In any event, a long way of me saying to you, I have done an intensive study of the moon. And I've also spent time, I knew Edgar Mitchell, not well. I had some conversations with him and knew the Apollo 17 astronaut scientist mission leader, I think it was 17, Dr. Brian O'Leary, who was a very dear friend and came and stayed with me, he and his wife Meredith, in London before he died. So I had a lot of beautiful exchanges with everyone from astronauts. Right now, I've got one of NASA's superstar rocket scientists, Shanaz Soni, on my science team, and as a full panelist, a member of the Lazarus Initiative. And she's building technically, she's building the module for the mission to the dark side of the moon in 2024. Go figure. I've asked Shanaz Soni, as one of NASA's top rocket scientists, is the moon what we think it is? And she honestly doesn't know the answer to that. And she is noble enough and spiritualized enough to be able to say, I don't know. I've studied orbital mechanics and what I've been told to study. I know the picture I've been given, but I can't tell you, Sacha, if the moon fucking exists or doesn't, or whether we went to the moon or not. So you see, you ask me about the moon. I am somewhat, for a layman, expert on the moon. I've spoken to the great shaman and mystics who have traveled to the moon and who understand the nature of the moon, the deviant nature of the moon. Otherwise, I refer to the moon as being the evil cross-dressing stepdad. That's what I call the moon. I regard the moon as a cross-dressing or a transsexual stepfather who's got I've now softened my approach a bit. I now am prepared to look at the moon again, and I acknowledge and I can accede that this moon has served a tremendous purpose and function, but I want it the fuck out of orbit. I want it out of the solar system. That's the truth of the matter. I do not regard the moon as anything feminized at all. I do not regard it. I regard it as a masculine technological object, and a highly deviant one at that. I believe it is a warship. I believe it's arguably decommissioned, but it's certainly the greatest body in our entire field of existence, which brings about, by definition of its own being, enforces and ensures dystopia in our world. It creates the raging oceans. It creates the lunacy, which is where the term lunacy comes from.
Yes.
It ensures dystopia. It ensures blood economy, a springboard of the Martian enterprise. I could go on at great length on the subject, just to say that we have been moon worshipping idiots on this planet for a very long time. There is only one source, and that is soul, that is the sun. And that is the limitless source of vibral light and any other form of light, in point of fact. The moon was brought in, and in so being brought forward, created a false notion, which is binary logic and duality and dystopia, because we're now looking from that to this, to that, to this. So if we want to step out of the checkerboard of the dualistic binary mutancy of the fucked upness of being in this quadrant of the universe, we have to at some point absolve, redeem, relinquish, release any adherence to the moon. If we relinquished adherence to it, it would leave. And if it left, the earth plane would move, in my view, into a temperate, balanced planetary system. And I do believe that the moon will leave. And just so you know, this is roundabout when I do accept certain people saying, oh, he's a crackerjack. But again, I would ask those people a simple question. Mofo, lean in, I'm talking to you. Have you sat down in your living room with astronauts? Have you sat down in your living room with bishops and with presidents? Have you sat down with rocket scientists and people who understand stellar parallax and orbital mechanics? No, you have not. So shut the fuck up. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so beautiful just to have the honest and raw, and also the background into how you can actually come to assimilate those thoughts from the experiences of others and yourself. And I love that you revealed, as we know, many of us know, that the moon was actually brought here, brought there. And that is mind-blowing for people, because they don't know they were lied to. It's like, how do you know we're in the solar system? How do you know there are other? You were told that. Who were you told by? NASA. You know, need a serious answer.
Not a serious agency.
Right. And it's such a right. And it's such a, and for me, I've spent many years in the space industry providing the greatest telemetry, propulsion, composite, engineers and scientists into the industry at large. I was even going to go down the journey of studying to become an astrophysicist. I was that obsessed. And then when I really got on the inside and saw all the technology we had, and then saw knowing about Nikola Tesla and what he brought at 1897, I'm like, hold on a second, why are we still here in 1999 with this ridiculous, retarded narrative that everybody believes? And I thought, I'm not going to waste 10 years of my life. And I'm not being disrespectful to astrophysicists. How could you know, Ho? How could you know? We don't know what we don't know till we know it, right? But it's important to have these little, drop in here, drop in there. The moon is not going to harm the planet any longer. And if the moon is, the moon's jumping around, that's what I'm saying. That's why I mentioned it. And so it's already happening, Sacha. Your wish for it to be gone, it's already happening. It doesn't know where to frigging put itself at night right now. Over there, But it's the awakening in the people, like, look up. So, I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that, because I might have to go into a DANI rant, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste my precious time with you. Thank you for describing the cosmogenesis in the way that you did. Thank you for sharing the beautiful, heartwarming aspects of your childhood and your mom, and that you had this real iconic feminine force, at your back, at your side as a child growing up. And it's such an important thing, as well as having your dad as well. Do you think that if your parents had stayed together, that life would have been somewhat different for you? Do you ever ponder on that?
No, never stopped to give it a moment's thought. And I think it's for me an absurd notion. The isness and the geometry of now is really what I'm concerned about. I really have little respect for anyone, much less myself, to look over the shoulder and conjecture as to what might have been. It's of no consequence.
Excellent. No, thank you for saying that. And again, that familial inheritance, DNA, whatever it is that we get stuck in, it would serve us all to stop saying wow, wow, blah, blah, and just continue to move on. But it's beautiful to have these stories, though, because they do create the tapestry of us and our soul and where we eventually put our perspective. In terms of your humanitarian work right now, please can you share the influences, but also the creation of Humanitad, which I believe was before Lazarus Project.
Well, Humanitad I set up 23 years ago, in 1999. I think it's about 23 years ago. So that's the oldest organization that I founded and that is still extant. Albeit I've taken the website down because it's of no real consequence. I'll be putting something up again shortly, but it's really all the backstory, the diplomatic work, and we were being hacked like 30,000 times a day. It just became so tiresome. So I'm putting Humanitad back up through sachastone.com and newearthhorizon.com, which is the catch-all platform that I've been developing with my team. So we're about to trigger a kind of renaissance of our own in about a month from now. I think 1st of April is D-Day, and we launched sachastone.com. We launched the newearthhorizon.com, and all of the attendant organizations and initiatives that I've found that are kind of composited there, like Humanitad, like the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, and so on and so forth. And then there's also Lazarus Initiative .com, which is up and running now. People can check that out. And then there's also the Arise Guerrilla News Network. I think that's guerrillanewsnetwork.com or something like that. And that's out there. And I launched that about 6-7 weeks ago. I confess I've not seen the website, but I've heard it's very good. I actually will make a point of checking it out after this interview, because I should say thank you to the team. But the Guerrilla News Network I launched a few weeks ago because I wanted to, sorry, fucking mosquito, I hate these things.
Oh yeah, bastards.
That's alien intervention.
Yes.
The Guerrilla News Network, that I launched recently is, for me, my the only place I'm really focusing on activism work, because I do a lot of frontline activism, and it's very important to me to continue to put myself there at the front and head above the parapet. But I couldn't keep up the pace I was doing last year. It literally almost killed me. And I can't do another 1,000 media drops in 18 months like I did in the last 18 months. So I decided to stop and take stock of what I was doing and create a fortnightly show every 2 weeks, which is like 2 hours long, bring on a dozen or so leading influencers and activists from all around the world and just let them do intel drops, bang, 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 bang. And I anchor that. And just fantastic. I mean, the one this weekend, I had the driver of the Minister of the Environment of the Ukraine who came on to tell us what was happening on the ground. Of course, he was bullshitting about the wars and the bombs going off. And really, well, I don't want to be disrespectful to him, but it felt to me like an infiltration job of my show. And I didn't buy what I was hearing at all. I had other people in Ukraine saying to me that, hang on, we've got 32 million people with smartphones. You would think we'd be seeing some of the footage, wouldn't you, on social media? Why are we not seeing babies' heads being blown off? Because it's not happening anywhere near how the theatrical production is being construed and sold to us by, again, the Sabbatean media machine, which is trying to drive forth the narrative that the savior, political savior of humanity, one Vladimir Putin, is the bad guy. No, he's not. Other way around, folks. So Guerrilla News Network is vital in my mind, and it's doing a vital job. We had a whole bunch of people, forgive me, I can't remember all the names, but every 2 weeks we do the show, and there are top guns. Scott McKay, Patriot, a street fighter, Chief Honcho is on there, Lee Dandas, all of my kind of activist friends that I did the Arise Freedom Tour in the United States last year with the Coming On as well.
Mm.
So that's something to watch for. And that's undiluted intel drops from the front line. And people need to hear that kind of news now, and really need to disidentify entirely from public funded mainstream shyster news.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much again for creating that, bringing people together. We do need the actual fucking news around our planet, planet.
AFN, actual fucking news. I like it.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
make the logo.
Yeah, thank you, darling, for free. Oh my God. All right. So that I love that. I love that. And I watched some of that. I think it's when you and I first started talking and messaging. We were talking about Alex Collier, for example. I know he's somebody that you've admired over the years, bringing his interest. He's such a beautiful guy and a friend. And I remember that's when the initiative was launching, and I was just blown away by all the different kinds and types of people and the different subjects that kind of all blend in this smorgasbord or melee together. It just gives some kind of awakening internally, which is just so important. I am aware that it's late there, darling, and I so want to go into the technologies, the health, the body, but might we table that so you can get some sleep?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to do that. I could speak to it for the next 20 minutes if you want, or if you want to do more of a dedicated drop for a longer period of time, then absolutely no problem. The staff can set that.
Thank you. I think 20 minutes would be great, but it's so much more expensive than that. I mean, I think we kind of messed up some people's heads by saying, by the way, the moon's really fucking about and it's kind of on its way out. You know what I mean? And then to dedicate some time to look at all your research, all your understanding, the way you explain all of the amazing interventions for the perfect health and wealth of mind, body, and soul. I think that means its own beautiful, loving
and
attention.
That's the real story as well. That is really all I'm interested in as well, is now the microbial formulas and the technological innovations, which I'm very blessed to be very, very connected to. In fact, I'm just today got confirmation 2 weeks time I'll be back with the military scientists in Eastern Europe. The prototyping is ready. I've been invited to go and check it out. Very excited about the life pod technologies, which will be able to regrow limbs and teeth and eyeballs and remediate turn the genes on that have turned off and shrink tumors and all that stuff. And there are technological advances that have been made and to do with medical science, so to speak, that are on the threshold of a paradigmatic shift. And that's going to be very exciting, because once that hits the mainframe, and the microbial formulas, which are even more exciting than that, which are able to, again, address things like age reversal and take us back to immortality as a function of reality, of biological reality. That stuff is upon us. I'm very excited to be directly involved with some of the leading microbiologists and biochemists on both sides of the Atlantic and on both sides of the Pacific. Yeah. So that's a major focus of mine right now. And I'll be unrelenting for the next year or two as it relates to that. Why? Well, that would be because we've had the parent corporation and Cronus creep into our genetics and snip the mitochondria. It doesn't get more serious than that, baby.
Yeah, so true, so true. Oh my goodness. Well, listen, Sacha friggin' fucking amazing Stone. I love you, man. And I'm so, so, so grateful for the time we've had together and for the information that you've shared and sharing your childhood. You know, it's a beautiful, beautiful insight into who the child was to the man that you be today. And I'm so grateful. And I'll make sure that everything that you want link-wise is under this broadcast. It will go out today, which is March 10th. Well, is it March 10th? I think it is March 10th, 2022. Thank you, sir. I look forward to connecting with you again. Is there any final words? Oh, any final words?
No,
you're good. Okay, brilliant. All right. All right. God bless you, my love. And to you guys out there, thank you so much for being here. I know that you're going to be so happy to have spent some time with the great Sacha Stone. And I send you my love, and I see you soon.